A couple of quick things before we start. 1. For viewers in the future, if any, this video was released while Monsters and Memories was in alpha, so who knows what may have happened since then. And 2. I titled my last video, Monsters and Memories, Advice for New Players Who Don't Have a Background in Classic EverQuest, because the community pre-launch has been largely made up of EverQuest vets, and, in particular, veterans of Project 99 Classic EverQuest emulator server. Consequently, a lot of that culture of play has transferred over to Monsters and Memories, and I thought it would be helpful for players without this background to understand some of the implicit assumptions shared by many people in the community due to our shared background. However, various people commented on that video that Monsters and Memories seemed like an EQ clone, and I apologize if I gave this impression. While there are parts of the game that are very reminiscent of Classic EverQuest, along with various homages, there are so many additional systems and features in M&M that they're definitely different games. The gathering, pack animals, arbitrage, and consignment systems, for example, add entirely new spheres of gameplay, and the class abilities obviously take inspiration from a variety of games. The devs have cited plenty of other MMOs, such as Ultima Online, Star Wars Galaxies, and Classic WoW, as being inspirations. So, as I said in a response to a comment on that video, I think it would be closer to say that EverQuest and Monsters and Memories are members of the same subgenre of MMO. They're both setting-first virtual worlds inspired by classic pen and paper RPGs, but they are their own distinct games. Anyway, let's get started with my original intro. I've been following an indie MMO called Monsters and Memories for a few years now. It promises to be a virtual world in the vein of classic EverQuest. That is, a virtual world that does not revolve around the player. The game won't give you any direction. There are no NPCs with quest markers above their heads. You don't load up on quests and run around checking them off. You get plunked down in front of a city and have to figure out what to do. The most orientation you get is a note telling you to see your guildmaster for training. This is very much the kind of game that I like. Mr. Betung has a video where he discusses a design paradigm that he calls setting supremacy. This is basically the design practice of prioritizing a consistent world over streamlined gameplay. In this development style, a certain amount of jank is acceptable if it's in service to creating an interesting world. The setting is more important than ensuring that the player is never frustrated. Mr. Betung proposes that the classic RPGs of the late 90s took this approach to game design, while modern attempts to recreate that era have moved away from the setting-first approach in favor of a more player-friendly experience. Now, of course, I wasn't involved in game development in the 90s, or now for that matter, but I do find Mr. Betung's video to be fairly convincing. But he was talking about single-player games. So, to see if this also holds true for MMOs, let's take a look at some of the early advertising for EverQuest. Marketing teams don't necessarily know which aspects of a game to focus on, of course, but here's an example where I think they were on the right wavelength, so I'm going to give credit where credit is due. So the first thing we notice, well, ignoring the first page, the first thing we notice, due to the visual hierarchy, is the phrase, "You're in our world now." World. The first thing they want you to know about the game, other than that it has scantily clad women in it, I guess, is that it's a virtual world. And the bullet points below the phrase, "You're in our world now," are all about the world as well. That it's full of other players, the places you can explore, the races you can play as, the visual beauty of the setting. They don't talk about the combat or the raids or anything like that. The words heading each bullet point are adventure, journey, choose, and immerse. And for me, this is a great encapsulation of what made EverQuest special. It was an immersive journey, where you could choose your own adventure. It's been years since I've gotten sucked into any MMO other than Project 1999 Classic EverQuest emulator. And I think this is because they just don't make setting-first MMOs anymore. When I try to play something like Elder Scrolls Online, I might have fun for a session, but there's nothing to motivate me to log back on. There's no lasting excitement for me. And when I play World of Warcraft Classic, I find the quest-based gameplay makes me mindlessly run back and forth. I literally didn't notice this big mine entrance in the middle of my screen because I was looking for it on my mini-map instead of paying attention. This is why I've been so interested in Monsters and Memories. I want a game that makes me pay attention to the world. A game with a strong sense of place. A game where I feel like I'm just one of many adventurers struggling to survive in a fantasy world. Like I'm a character in an old-school D&D campaign, and there are all these things going on around me. Feuding factions, the haunted ruins of lost kingdoms, underground civilizations, places of splendor and places of horror, and most importantly, the agency to interact with this wondrous setting however I want. For me, very few MMOs have managed to evoke this feeling in the past. Classic EverQuest being the only one I can think of. But for Monsters and Memories pre-alpha, and now alpha, playtests, it seems like this is very much what Niche Worlds Cult is creating. To keep players' attention on the world, NWC has implemented various systems of friction that players have to learn to overcome. Friction being the opposite of user-friendliness. Unsurprisingly, they're receiving some pushback over this approach to game design. Some people have requested, or demanded, various quality of life features be added to make the game more streamlined, less daunting for new players, and to generally respect the player's time more. Tooltips, less darkness, clearer direction about how to interact with NPCs, easier corpse retrieval, quick travel, tutorials, maps, and so on. None of these are inherently terrible suggestions for a game, and NWC has said they're going to add more tooltips and some sort of in-game map objects that can be bought or traded.
Maps! Get your fresh maps here. Buy 2, get the second one half price.
But when commenters suggest adding these aids, they often receive considerable pushback from other players. So why is that? Why are some people so concerned over these little changes that would respect the player's time more? Are they just irrational? Are they blinded by nostalgia? Well, I don't think so. So let's try to understand why inconvenience might be desirable. When deciding which features to include, I always hear game designers say it's important to consider the purpose of your game. How should playing the game feel? What is the core experience? Is your game about working together as a team to beat bosses using class synergies? Or is it about navigating an unforgiving world in which teamwork is the surest way to survive? If it's the first one, then quality of life features probably won't detract from the experience. In fact, they may well enhance the experience by making it easier to get to those core fights. However, if it's the second, the world one, then, in my admittedly armchair opinion, you may want to be careful about adding anything to ease the player's way, as you might inadvertently undercut the experience you want to create. Many people point to the way obtuse systems and corpse runs help foster social interaction, and that removing them strips out much of the need to talk to other players, thereby weakening the community. I completely agree, but I also believe there's another way that many quality of life features weaken the experience of being in a virtual world. Before I explain what I mean by that, I'm going to take a bit of a detour and talk about the old school revival, revolution, renaissance, whatever, which is more commonly called the OSR. This will be related to my point in like 2 paragraphs, so bear with me. The OSR is, or was, depending on who you ask, a movement in pen and paper role-playing games that began in the 2000s as a reaction to the increasing levels of balance and complexity in the design of D&D after Wizards of the Coast acquired it from TSR. The OSR started with people making retro clones of old editions of D&D. But soon, new games emerged, inspired by the ways some people had played in the 70s and 80s. Features such as dungeon timers, resource management, gold for XP, and a tendency towards avoiding fair fights. OSR characters have few abilities or skills, and players are expected to use their creativity to narrate how they want to overcome obstacles, rather than just roll a skill. Bandit's Keep has a good video on this where he looks through the Moldvay basic book and comments on how its examples of dungeon exploration teach this style of play. Now, I was first introduced to this type of play in like 2011 or 2012, At the time, I was in a group that was alternating between Iron Heroes and Pathfinder, both based on 3rd edition D&D. And we'd had a lot of fun with those. But then the GM said he was getting tired of all the complexity and wanted to run a retro clone for a change. I thought this was kind of a dumb idea at first. Why would having fewer mechanical options make for a more engaging experience? Why would having to track a bunch of resources be fun? Why would tracking item weight be fun? But over time, I realized that these features create a very specific kind of fun. When implemented well, they make you feel like you're an adventurer. They make dungeons scary places to explore, rather than a linear series of fights. They make you choose what is worth looting and what to leave behind. The tension between spending time and running out of light, or getting into a random encounter, gives more weight to every decision. In contrast, Pathfinder dungeons tended to feel somewhat mindless to me, because they were primarily set pieces for combat. Most of the thinking was about which of your abilities to use each round, or tracking how long various effects had been active. To me, Pathfinder now feels tedious compared to exploring a well-implemented OSR dungeon, which feels like a multifaceted challenge because it's filled organically with choices and consequences at each step. This makes you feel like you're a very mortal adventurer in a perilous world, instead of a combat machine slogging through curated set pieces. So how does that relate to MMOs? Well, we've seen how certain design choices that might seem like tedious busy work can make a game feel more like an adventure when implemented correctly. So let's talk about how the same thing could happen in an MMO. Classic EverQuest was chock full of obnoxious systems, such as a lack of in-game maps, night blindness, item and money weight, the need to eat and drink, slow travel, and corpse recovery and death. I don't think it's controversial to say that World of Warcraft took a lot of inspiration from EverQuest. But WoW's designers streamlined pretty much all of these inconvenient systems out of the game, and focused instead on quests, character abilities, and loot. This made the leveling and adventuring process a lot more straightforward, and the moment-to-moment combat aspect much more mechanically demanding. It was a well-made game, in a well-loved setting. The game dethroned EverQuest, and became the template for pretty much all subsequent MMORPGs. And its success was mostly deserved. But was anything of value lost as a result? You may have guessed that my answer is the feeling of being in the world. To explore why I think this, let's look at why I feel like I'm doing things in each game. I only played WoW from vanilla through Burning Crusade, so I'm comparing Classic EQ with WoW Classic. Just mentally append the word classic to each one when I say the name. Number 1. Why am I fighting things? In WoW, the answer is usually because a quest told me to. These enemies were placed here for me to fight. If I skip this quest, I may be underleveled and undergeared for the next area. For Classic EverQuest, the answer is because I chose to, or because I was attacked first. Number 2. Why am I in this dungeon? In WoW, the answer is usually A. A quest told me to, or B. Because I'm after loot. In Classic EverQuest, why am I in this dungeon could be for a variety of reasons. Maybe I'm looking for a quest item. Maybe I'm looking for loot. Maybe I'm there to res someone, or help with a corpse recovery. Maybe I'm there to power level someone. Maybe I'm passing through on my way to somewhere else. Maybe I'm just there to level. Whatever the reason, however, me being there is optional, and I'm not expected to clear the dungeon. I'm probably going to navigate through it until I get to my goal, for example, a mob or mob? Let's say mob, that I want to camp, or a group that I'm joining. And then I'll leave when I choose, not when the dungeon tells me to. Well, except for in the case of trains, of course, or death. Number 3. Why do I need to buy food? In WoW, the reason is to speed up recovery after a fight, so that I can get back into the action more quickly. In EverQuest, the reason is I need to eat and drink as part of my daily routine if I want to function normally. It has no direct impact on individual fights, but I do need to plan ahead and stock up if I want to go out adventuring. Number 4. Why do I need a light source? In WoW, I don't. I can always see clearly. In EverQuest, at least if I'm cool enough to play as a human, I need light so that I can navigate safely through dark places. Without it, I'll be running into walls and hostile mobs, and have a very unfun time trying to recover my corpse. The world doesn't have to show itself to me. It's up to me to make it visible. Number 5. Why am I looking at this map? In WoW, because it will tell me where to go. I stare at my maps and quest indicators until I've arrived at the goal I've been given. In EverQuest, I don't have a map. I have to pay attention to my surroundings to learn my way around. I may need other players to guide me, either in person or by tabbing out to a map someone has made and posted online. If I want to get somewhere, I have to learn how to do so. Number 6. Why am I afraid to die? In WoW, because dying is tedious. I'll have to run back from the graveyard as a ghost, nothing can hurt me while I do, and the map clearly shows where I died. I just hit W for several minutes until I'm back. The monetary cost is minor, so the only real penalty is that I don't get to play until I get back. In EQ, if I die, I'll have to navigate back to my corpse with nothing. The losing experience aspect sucks too. I'll have to find a way to avoid hostile enemies between me and my corpse. Maybe I have magic to help with that. Maybe other players can help me. Maybe I'll just have to be very cautious. A corpse run will eat up my time like in WoW, but unlike in WoW, it usually requires engaging with the world. There are obstacles to overcome, so recovering from death is gameplay, not a timeout. Number 7. Why should I read this quest text? In WoW, I don't need to, and most people don't. My UI will tell me everything I need to know. In EverQuest, I read it carefully to understand how to complete the quest. Number 8. Why am I clicking on this NPC? In WoW, that's how I get my quest. Now I just click accept and move on. In EverQuest, clicking on an NPC is just the first step. Next, I might press the C key to check the NPC's level relative to mine, and see how they feel about me. Why do that? Maybe I want to see if they like me enough for me to do a quest. Maybe I want to be sure they aren't going to attack me. Notice how this is an active experience rather than something that is passively shown in the UI, like in WoW. I could also press H to start a conversation with the NPC. Why do that? Maybe they have a quest. Maybe they have something interesting to say. Maybe neither. I won't know unless I do. If they have a quest, I'll have to type responses to what they've told me in order to proceed. This reinforces that I am in a fantasy world where NPCs are people to interact with. In WoW, NPCs are vending machines that dispense assignments. Number 9. Why do things have weight? We already have a finite bag space limiting what we can carry. In WoW, the answer is things don't have weight. I can just loot everything until my bags are full, and then head back to town to sell. In EverQuest, things have weight to make me decide what is and is not worth looting. It increases the number of decisions I have to make, which can make looting a more thoughtful process. It makes me learn what will sell for the most, so I can make a determination about the weight-cost ratio of each item. Again, it's making me think about the world and what I've found out about it instead of just clicking loot all and moving on. Number 10. Why are there aggressive, higher-level mobs in the newbie area? In WoW, there generally aren't. In fact, there are no aggressive mobs of any kind where you start out. This makes no sense from a world standpoint. These wolves would be attacking me anywhere else in the game. But again, this game is not designed with setting supremacy in mind. The devs don't want new players to face any setbacks like getting swarmed by ads. And they definitely don't want to do something unfair like one-shot newbies for not paying attention to the world. That would slow down their questing and detract from the carefully balanced procession of challenges. In contrast, in EverQuest, Holly Windstalker is there because the world does not exist for the player's benefit. As another example, There are low-level mobs in North Karana, even though it's far too remote for low-level players to be leveling in, because the world is a living place, not a content funnel. EverQuest is full of NPCs and players with their own, at times, mutually incompatible goals. And it's up to me to pay attention to what's going on so I can survive. So, we can see that all the little annoyances that WoW discarded can have an effect on how we interact with the world. Without these unhelpful systems, we interact with the world a lot less and have to make fewer decisions. There are tracks laid out for us. We just need to follow them in order to have fun. EverQuest didn't give us tracks. It was up to us as players to decide what to do and where to go. But anything we decided to do would have obstacles beyond just the difficulty of combat. The world itself was hostile, or, at best, wouldn't help us unless we learned how to make it do so. This, for me, made EverQuest a more engaging space. It was a world, not a game. The perfect example of this difference was the time in WoW Classic when I decided to level my human paladin in Lordaeron instead of Stormwind. I was a huge Warcraft fan in my childhood. My friends and I used to recreate stuff from Warcraft 1 and 2 with our Legos, and the setting was a major influence on our early pen and paper role-playing campaigns. So, I decided to roleplay my paladin as one of the last knights of the Silver Hand, fighting a lonely, hopeless battle in fallen Lordaeron. Now, in an open-ended, setting-first game like Classic EQ, or Monsters and Memories, hopefully, this sort of thing is very doable. It's not unusual to find low-level trolls and ogres in Crushbone, for example. Crushbone is a newbie dungeon in the elf starting area, which is on a different continent from where ogres and troll players start. And ogres and trolls will be killed on sight by the elf guards if they approach the city. Still, plenty of newbie ogres and trolls manage the trip. EverQuest just provides you challenges, not solutions. It doesn't plan your journey for you. WoW, of course, is the opposite. As a human, the game is designed around 3 options. Do quests in the Kingdom of Stormwind, do quests in the areas around Ironforge, or do quests in the Night Elf areas. Straying from those options is very much not planned for. But I wanted to give it a try. So I took the tram to Ironforge, ran to Menethil Harbor, swam to South Shore, and then ran to Tirisfal Glades. Since I was level 1 when I started, I died a lot on this trip, and my gear was almost all broken. But I did eventually make it into the newbie area for the Forsaken. My starting hammer still had a few points of durability left, which left me fight until a new weapon drop. I couldn't sell anything, of course, and there were no quest rewards because I couldn't do the quests. And because I couldn't do the quests, XP was slow. But suddenly I was having fun. More fun than I'd ever had before in WoW. Having to keep an eye out for guards and that wandering abomination guy kept me on my toes. It felt cool to be like Baron in his last days in Dorthonion. Dorthonion?
A remnant of desperate men remained on the highland of Dorthonion.
Okay, Baron in Dorthonion. Anyway, I knew that I had found some agency in the game, despite the intentions of the designers. This experience is still one of my fondest memories of the game, and I remember it so fondly because it was a time where I chose my play experience rather than following the rails set down for me. I didn't mind that it was hard. In fact, the challenge made it even more enjoyable. This is why I like games like Classic EverQuest and Monsters and Memories, because the world doesn't give me anything. I have to find my own way, and every step is rewarding because it's a step towards achieving a goal that matters to me. Of course, not everyone likes the experience of making their own fun, and that's fine. Seth Skorkowski has a good video where he talks about how he likes to run heist campaigns where he gives his players an objective, and then the players are free to accomplish it however they want. He doesn't plan how they can do it. He just sets them loose and sees what they come up with. However, one time, he had a player who got frustrated with this approach because this particular player wanted to be railroaded. He didn't enjoy open-ended games. He wanted to figure out the correct way to solve the challenge. That is, figure out what solution the GM had in mind, For him, finding the intended solution to the puzzle is the fun. It sounds like he's not an Alexander and the Gordian knot kind of player, which is fine. And Seth also points out that there's nothing wrong with this preference. But it did mean that the campaign wasn't a good fit for him. And to me, this is similar to the divisions over quality of life in Monsters and Memories. When I play an MMO, I want a virtual world where I can choose my own objectives and tempo, and kind of just enjoy the experience of being one of many adventurers in the fantasy world. I like the idea of Monsters and Memories as a third place, and from player comments, I don't seem to be alone in this desire. However, I feel that there are other players who just want to focus on getting loot and XP, and don't seem that interested in experiencing the game world beyond just those two things. For these players, anything that slows down the bits between XPing is just tedious busy work. Maybe I'm oversimplifying. It may be more of a continuum than an either-or. I don't know. Let me know civilly in the comments. So, whether you are yourself interested in the experience of living in a virtual world, or just want to group and get loot, may affect how you feel about the game's design. If you just want to group and get loot, and there's nothing wrong with that, then it's understandable that you want to streamline your ability to do so. If you're like me, however, then you benefit from having more sources of friction with the world. These things aren't tedious, they would make the world engaging. Slow travel time reinforces that you're just a small part of a larger world. And running back and forth through the same areas means that you really get to know them. Having to learn where to sell stuff makes you differentiate between NPC vendors. Having to retrieve your corpse on death gives adventuring and exploring real tension. I know my heart starts to race every time I peer around a corner in a dangerous dungeon. And I'm always weighing the pros and cons of initiating a risky fight. I've seen some people complain that the danger of corpse runs just makes them play it safe and not explore. But to me that's a feature, not a bug. The danger of corpse runs makes risks actually risky. It means some parts of the world remain mysterious and beyond my grasp. But I'm always tantalized by the stories of the players who do venture into them. I've never been to the Plane of Fear in EverQuest, for example, but I love hearing about it. So, why not give players a choice? Why not make these quality of life things optional in Monsters and Memories? The people who want to have a setting-first experience can turn off maps, compasses, and fast travel, and turn on corpse runs, selective vendors, and darkness. The others can focus on getting their next piece of loot. My counterpoint is this. Why not make NPC aggro optional? Why not make death optional? There might be some people who would say, sure, why not? But I think that most would agree that this would undercut the experience of the game. It would be robbing the player of the experience the game was designed to give. This, I think, is why people like me are very wary of quality of life additions. If the core experience is the world, and its indifference or even hostility towards us is how we connect with it, then mitigating that indifference means that we are essentially opting out of the core experience. And while I suppose allowing others to opt out of the core experience, or focus on a different core experience, wouldn't inherently hurt mine, there is something selfishly appealing about having a game that is made for someone like you. A game where the default playstyle is your playstyle. I often see people retort that once they've learned how to overcome a system in the game, there's no value in doing it anymore, and that it's just tedium at that point. But for me, these systems are always fun, because the initial challenge is just one part, not the endgame. Every time I navigate my way down to EverQuest's lower Guck without a map, I feel a little rush of excitement. Like, yeah, I know this world. I get the same feeling every time I do my rounds to sell stuff in Monsters and Memories. There's just this great feeling of knowing that I've found how to survive and thrive in the virtual world. All the obtuse systems in Monsters and Memories are just things I need to learn to overcome in order to prosper in Ithorel. And every time I engage with them, either to figure them out, or when I've already mastered them, my mind is on the world, so I never get bored. Also, the more I learn about how things work, the more opportunities I have to help other players, which connects me to the community, and is a rewarding experience in and of itself. I get that not everyone is motivated by the same things, so I'm not here to tell you that you're wrong for not appreciating the game in the same way. But for me, these systems are wonderful, and I love having a game that puts them front and center. More importantly, however, even if these friction systems were optional, in a social game, there's always the danger of being pressured to use them so as to not let down other players. How can you expect your group to wait 20 minutes for you to run back from your bind point, when you could just warp back to the dungeon using fast travel? So I think that's why people like me tend to be so passionate about keeping the game's options to only those that feed the core experience. So why am I making this video? I mean, people have been arguing about the correct way to play RPGs since before I was born. Well, one, because I like to ramble, and making videos is fun. And two, because a lot of the people criticizing the lack of quality of life features in the game have described it as bad design. And hopefully I've at least shown how their mission is just different design. I don't expect that to change anyone's preferences, but hopefully this video will at least help people understand that these systems weren't put in by mistake, and that those of us who enjoy them aren't doing so out of some kind of self-deluded nostalgia. Although, maybe if you're one of the people who thinks that, you haven't bothered to sit through this video anyway. So, I don't know, maybe it was pointless after all. If you're going to leave a comment about why you disagree with me, and please do so, please include whether you made it to the end of the video or not. I'm curious. Anyway, to sum things up, I've seen people complain that Monsters and Memories doesn't respect the player's time. An obvious retort from someone like me would be, I don't want the game to respect my time. But I don't think that's exactly what I mean. I think at the heart of things, I don't want an MMO to respect me. I don't want it to hand me anything. The game should not revolve around me at all. It should be up to me to figure out how to make the most of the virtual world. That's how I get engaged in the experience. To that end, I think it's better to say, Monsters and Memories may not respect my time, but Niche Worlds Cult absolutely does. Time playing Monsters and Memories doesn't feel like time wasted, because it feels like a world. NWC has made an MMO in which my moment-to-moment experience is fun, and that is something special.